Hey, Nobsters out there in podcast land. I am one of your co-hosts, Richard the Morganator Morgan, welcoming you to Film Knobs. To the left of me, we have
Steve Benning.
And to my right,
Thank God you were the one to the left because I was having trouble. Oh, is it supposed to be? Am I to
My
his
left or your left?
Yeah,
Or his left.
I was very confused. Oh, by the way, I'm Barry B-Man Benning. Sorry about that.
I just took the lead and said, it's my left.
Right. Oh, wait a minute. Are you? No, you are too.
I'm owning the left today.
Well, I believe that's a first.
so are we having access line problems already?
Yes. We are. What's the word? Geometrically challenged today.
Yes.
Indeed. I'm geometrically challenged every day, though, guys. I barely made it through college algebra. I think it took me like three times to get through college. I'm so old. Back in the day, I only had to have like 3 hours credit of math with my English degree. That's made me on my million so far. And
It will.
I took college algebra 3 times. Thank you.
So that means you're perfectly qualified to talk about today's topic,
Right, absolutely.
which is, of course, special effects.
Special effects. I got a question for you. All right, so you said you knew the difference between special effects and visual effects, right?
Right.
So what is the difference between special effects and visual effects?
Okay, so special effects versus visual effects. All right, special effects is anything that can happen on the set during production. So it includes props, makeup, animatronics, and pyrotechnics, etc. Visual effects are digital, so they're made in post-production on a computer. They are not the same thing.
Not the same thing. So in today's parlance, not the same thing. Because I know it used to be back in the day. Okay, you could win an Academy Award for best visual, or no, it's for best special effects to begin with. And then starting in 1964, I think, with Mary Poppins being the first winner, they changed it to best visual effects. But now, it wasn't because of computer effects, like you said. It was because they changed. There's another type of effect, I guess, that we probably won't be talking a lot about, but best sound effects. Mm-hmm. So in 64, they branched it off from special effects to visual and sound effects. But you're saying visual effects now, at least, the exacting terminology is not the same thing as...
Right.
Okay.
That helps out with the... every year on the voter, the Oscar ballot, people, there's special effects and there's visual effects. I don't know.
Why do I get the sense that he was thinking about me when he...
I just don't know.
When he's using that voice.
There's this movie. This movie has so much great effects, but is it special effects or is it visual effects?
Or what makes the effects so special? Why not just regular effects, right?
Right.
And get off my green screen while you're at it.
You knew where that was going. So, what's all right? My next question is, what makes a special effect special?
I guess it's just a catch-all for anything that happens on the set.
Anything happens. All right. Okay. That's.
Or now, back in the day, even further back in the day, editing itself, in a way. I mean, you could do, let's take, for example, the grandfather of all the movies we'll be talking about today, George Méliès's A Trip to the Moon. Mm-hmm. So, by accident, George Méliès, he was doing something, and I can't remember what happened. His camera went off. It stayed in the same position, and he turned it back on. He was doing a street scene. And then it comes back on, and he notices, wow, things have changed, but it's a cool-looking effect. So is editing, and that's called the stop trick, I guess. Is that that's considered a special effect then, right?
Like stop motion?
Well, not necessarily stop motion. This was just like you stop the camera, you put something in, or take it out of the frame, or alter it in some way, and then you turn the camera back on. That's still a special effect.
Yeah, I guess in its purest form.
And its
back
purest-
in the day.
Back in the day when I was, back in 1902 when I was going to school.
You know, everybody remembers back in the day, 1902.
Right, exactly.
That was before CG, right?
Slightly.
So one of the considerations about whether or not filmmakers use special effects or visual effects is the budget. So the research that I found, according to one source, said that special effects usually cost more than visual effects. It's not always the case because the software programs that are used for visual effects are also very expensive. So there's like a balancing act going on about, I guess where to allocate money. And another consideration is some things you can do in post with visual effects that you can't do with special effects. One example that I found was like blowing up a building in an action movie. So like in Terminator 2, there was a building that was deemed for decommission that they used for one of the scenes. Well, in Batman The Dark Knight, they blew up a hospital in the movie, and I think they actually blew up a building.
An actual building.
Yeah.
But how many action movies have we seen, or sci-fi movies where they've blown up, say, the Statue of Liberty, the White House?
So they're not actually doing that.
No,
They're
no.
Okay, because that would be pretty expensive and deadly.
Right.
Yeah, and Nolan's pretty well known for wanting to use practical effects. He's a big in-camera person.
I'm gonna have to go along with Nolan on that. Well, it looks more real because I guess it is real, but what you're saying, a lot cheaper to do it.
It can be.
A lot cheaper to do it though. Wait a minute, even with expensive software. I mean, it's going to be cheaper to do it that way, right?
Probably more often than
on
not.
most. Yeah, because you can do that over and over. You
Right.
got one chance to
Right.
blow up your building.
Right.
You've got multiple chances on your software.
And so if you're like, blowing up a BMW, you don't have to really blow up a BMW, or just blow it up once and then get however many camera angles you want of the car exploding.
I think I'd like to blow up not just necessarily a BMW right now, but I'd like to blow up any make of a car right now. One in particular, actually, but I digress.
Yeah, that's another side story.
That's another side story.
Yeah. You're probably gonna make a movie about that story.
I may.
Call it transmission.
Wait a minute. Wasn't there
There was a movie called Transmission, I believe.
No, wait a minute. I'm thinking of that Johnny Depp movie that went nowhere. What
Transference.
Was that? That was Transference.
Transference, yeah.
You're right. Okay.
So sound effects don't always stand alone. Sometimes sound effects are used to make something very realistic during the shooting, and then visual effects are used to emphasize things that sound effects or special effects can't do.
Okay.
So they kind of, I guess even though they're distinctly different, the lines are being blurred, and they're starting to combine them even more.
You have done your homework.
Well, I am the FX wizard, after all.
That's right. We since we do tout you as the FX wizard, you got to come through.
I have to live up to
You
my.
got to come through on that.
Yeah, this is your show.
Oh, great! So wait a minute. I'm kind of hungry. I'm gonna go. Can I get me something to eat?
Sure, snack for a while.
Okay.
All right, so I was looking at the list of 2019 movies that we talked about last couple podcast episodes, and I was telling Steve over there that it looks like the top 30 movies that they're estimating, box office wise.
All right.
Almost all of them, if not all of them, have appeared to be special effects or visual effects.
What you mean? There's no straight dramas here in the top 30.
And the lowest budget that I found on that list is $45 million for the New Mutants. So I thought we could, do not only a deep dive on special effects, but just kind of a glancing look at special effects over the years and talk about some of the movies that we have seen that are special effects or visual effects heavy that have, spoke to us or, meant a great deal to us, that kind of just stick with us over the years.
That sounds like a pretty good idea to me. So, how do you propose? How are we going to do it? We're going to chronologically do this? Do we go old school first, or
We can start there since everything builds upon something.
everything builds upon something? Okay. Well, seeing that I'm the elder member here and can remember back in the days of a voyage to the moon and the Gutenberg press, why don't I start with like I said, I think all this builds upon from one of the most important silent movies of all time, Georges Méliès's A Trip to the Moon, which was made in 1902. And that movie is generally considered to be the first science fiction film, at least as we know it today. It's like 13, I believe it's 13 or 14 minutes long. And he might have made a short, I think he made a short a couple of years before this movie that touched on it, but it really didn't tell a story. This is the first one that told a story. Mm-hmm. And, like I said, the movies were in their infancy at this time, and Méliès had been a magician, so he was a prime candidate to figure out some special effects. So he used things like matte paintings, of course, and paintings like that, since he was on stage, they had used, they had to use paintings on stage, so that came in handy. Mm-hmm. He used pyrotechnics, which they also used on stage. He used the stop trick, which is basically just, stopping the camera, going and either altering something in the frame when it was stopped, or maybe taking it out or putting it back in and then starting the camera again. So, back then, that was probably a pretty amazing special effect.
Imagine what the audiences thought.
Well, they were. I'm sure they were quite amazed. Kind of like, the first audiences that saw. I don't know if you've ever seen the train coming into a station. It looks like it's coming right for.
Right.
Like allegedly, there were people, screaming, running out of the auditorium, soiling themselves, because they'd never seen anything like that before.
So that was the forerunner to War of the Worlds.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So now we've got the really old one, and I suggest if you haven't seen it, everyone should see at least one or two important silent films, and that's certainly one of them. And it's only 13 minutes, guys. So
it's a pretty easy watch.
It's a pretty easy, and it's pretty funny too. Actually, one of the more iconic shots or scenes in a movie ever is probably and actually you were talking about this before, Morganator, the moon shot,
right?
In that where you see the man in the moon is actually, it's a guy, with a pie around his face, and you see a spaceship, hit him right in the eye. But I guess the first movie, getting on from that, I'm trying to think special effects movies that meant something to me, and the first one I can remember as a kid was King Kong. That's the movie that probably, as far as special effects, thinking right now, I remember saying, man, this is awesome, as a kid. This is awesome. And I couldn't figure out how in the world did they... they get this HD. At that point, I was, maybe not the brightest kid in the world when I saw it, but still, I was 5 or 6 years old, and it was fascinated me. Here's this big monkey, and he's got this woman in his hand. He's climbing up the Empire State Building. It's amazing. And guys, I don't know. It certainly looks a bit hokey, not hokey, but old-fashioned. Looking at now, look what Peter Jackson did with King Kong in 2005. Mm-hmm. I'll still take that 1933 King Kong over Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong any day.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah.
Is it because of the nostalgia factor, or just?
No, I don't think so. And I think that's probably what some people, it's an easy thing to say. Well, you were a kid, and we kind of, again, nostalgia's big. You tend to like things a lot more when you think back on them. But my argument would be, is despite all of that, and even now, if I watch that movie, King Kong scared me at first. When you see him on Skull Island, and when he's a pretty scary guy. Mm-hmm. You think he's, maybe going to kill this girl. He kills all these huge dinosaurs. He's a mean dude. But it's such a good example of storytelling in that movie that you actually care about the ape, you know. And spoiler alert coming, everyone. You know, when when he's shot off the Empire State Building at the end of that movie, you know, it's hard not to get a tear in your eye because, you know,
You care.
you care. And in Peter Jackson's version, it was just, you know, it was more about the awe and spectacle of it. And it was, as far as that goes, it was amazing. That movie's amazing to look at. Mm-hmm. I didn't really care about it. And I think you'll see when we talk about some more of these movies that we've kind of, you know, talked about in the past with each other, that special effects are great, but they're at their greatest when they're not the story. When they're augmenting the story, when they're helping it out. And I think in the case of the first King Kong, it's certainly true.
Yeah, it made you feel something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, Willis O'Brien, the special effects director who worked on that movie, and I think, you know, he pretty much did a lot of that himself. I mean, that was a lot of, he used stop motion photography. And he had done that for a while. This wasn't his first go around with it. He actually there was a movie in 1925 that did fairly well called The Lost World. And it had a lot of dinosaurs in it, right? And he did that. He used stop motion with that movie as well. But with this movie, if you think about it, I recently watched a documentary about King Kong. And it's not just that King Kong, you know, dies in this movie and that he liked the girl. He had to figure out a way at, you know, just moving King Kong bit by bit, fraction by frame, you know, and this is painstaking. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The scene with where he fights the T-Rex in that movie took 7 weeks, I believe, to shoot that. What is that, Steve? About a minute or two, maybe something like that.
Yeah,
and you've got, you know, facial. They had to move his face in certain ways where he was an actor. I mean, King Kong was actually the biggest, not just physically, actor in that movie. He was a special effect, but he was an actor, and to do that with the tools that he had at the time. That's just stunning. It's still stunning.
Yeah, they had to humanize him, and that's probably, if you look back, his eyes are a little bit bigger. I mean, if you remember, it's probably because, you know, with the eyes you can kind of manipulate emotion more. You know, like wide eyes. Everybody sees a wide eye, they have a thought. You know, if they, you know, squinch their eyes, you know, they can sense anger. It was pretty smart what he did with that film.
Oh yeah, I agree. And they actually, I believe they had 4 main. I believe it was called armatures, skeletons for Kong, and each one, I think they had a kind of a specific look for. I know, and they actually did a couple of larger scale things. One was his hand. They actually had a huge version of his hand that the actress Fay Wray could be placed in, and he could close up. But he had different looks, I want to say, for each one of them. So. Well, yeah, it's just amazing work to think about it. I know I was watching an interview with, I want to say it was Ray Harryhausen, who was like, people don't understand how much work goes into that kind of thing. And Harryhausen certainly knew a thing about it or two because he studied under Willis O'Brien for, I believe Harryhausen's first movie was Mighty Joe Young. That Willis also did and won an Academy Award for.
Which was about another ape.
He was good. He was good at the giant ape movies.
I never seen Mighty Joe.
Oh, what about the remake? You didn't see the Disney remake?
No, sure haven't.
It was good. It certainly was no King Kong. It was better than Son of Kong. You know, King Kong was such a hit. Such a hit that year that it came out in 1933 that they quickly moved out a sequel, Son of Kong, which Willis O'Brien pretty much hated doing, but hey, the money was good, I guess.
But it did lay the groundwork for all the baby movies, right. TV series, that when they introduced the baby, when they run out of ideas.
Yeah. Usually, you're right. When you see Baby,
When they introduce the baby, it's a crushing blow to the TV series and the movie.
but as bad as Son of Kong was,
You know it's about to end.
as bad as Son of Kong is, it's still not as bad as Son of Godzilla, which, by the way, is the next movie I would go ahead. It's funny. So I went from one giant monster movie to another.
Of course.
With Godzilla, the 1954 version of the story of the giant lizard, not the 1956 American version. We got a hold of it and shot new scenes with actor Raymond Burr. Try to Americanize a little bit and was not near as successful. But I'm going to say, Stephen over there is going to agree with me. Godzilla, the 54 version, is a pretty amazing movie.
I love that movie. It's the way it's shot. It's shot in shadow, the silhouette. I love that movie.
Right. It looks so good. They actually shot that to get that slow motion look. Where they actually shot that at 4 times, at least when you see Godzilla out there, 4 times the regular speed to give it a little bit, give that more of that slow motion, that lumbering lizard look. But even though Godzilla is about a giant monster as well, they go about it a little bit differently. King Kong, again, done with stop motion, done with miniatures. They decided to go with a guy in a giant rubber suit in Godzilla, and it still works. This is a different way to go about it, but it still works. So they have this guy in this latex, this rubber latex suit, stomping on all these miniatures, painstakingly made. And I thought one of the interesting things about that was that the special effects director, Eiji Tsuburaya, had seen King Kong back, right after it was released, and he decided that he wanted to make his own monster movie. But his monster movie turned out to be a little bit different. Even though it was giant, turned out to be a little bit different. Godzilla was scary the whole way through for me as a kid. I mean, that movie, and it's still in some of its better scenes, it still packs a little bit of a wallop. We don't feel any sympathy for him at any time during that movie.
You didn't? I did.
No, I didn't feel not for Godzilla.
I don't know why I always felt a little something for Godzilla.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, I did in the later movies. Did you see that version of Godzilla first, though, or did you see one of the? Because there were countless. I can't remember. There's been at least 30 sequels through the years for Godzilla.
I probably saw one.
He became a good guy.
I probably saw one of the other sequels first before I saw Godzilla.
Yeah, and usually, not in all of those movies, but usually, he kind of became a good guy. He was
Like a protector.
Sometimes, yeah, he was a protector in some of those movies.
Yeah, I was always saw the versions. He fought all the monsters and
Right, where he would
right, and then Godzilla was a hero, and then later I saw the original. But and maybe I brought some of that into watching the original. I don't know.
Right. It's like, you know what? I'm going to root for him anyway.
She's like, wait a minute, Godzilla's a bad guy?
This is not right. But no, it's a fantastic film.
It is. I mean, I highly, and again, I really suggest to people who haven't seen it out there, or if they haven't seen the Japanese version, if they haven't seen Gojira, that's the one to watch. The Americanized version takes a lot of the impact out of it.
Well, the Godzilla King of the Monsters is that's the movie I'm looking forward to the most this year. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, what was it? I always want to say the Gareth Edwards. That was 2015,
14 or 15.
14, 15. If you look back at the cinematography, that actually does kind of emulate a lot of cinematography in that version. In the
Yeah. And
the shadowy, the kind of shot, the long shots, the wide shots.
Right.
The silhouette.
I'm sure that they studied up on.
Yeah.
Some, and you know, I want to say. We've got, and the special effects of that movie, amazing, right? And I didn't particularly care for at least the second half of that movie very much, other than the effects. But we've seen how far effects have come, and that was mostly CGI, I want to say, in that one. But in all of the Japanese movies, I think, all the Japanese sequels to Godzilla, even though they've incorporated some CGI into it, it's still, for the most part, guy in a rubber suit stomping on a lot of miniatures.
And I love every minute of it.
Exactly. I mean, there's something about, we talked about this, there's something about practical effects that you see, it just, even when you can tell they're fake, I don't know, I still like them more. There's something about it. Even the cheesy ones. That's just me, maybe.
No, it's me too. They're able to elicit a raw emotion for some reason, and I think part of it is too is that, and it won't be. Look, we'll look back 20 years from now, and actors will get used to the technology. They'll get used, more. I mean, they are now, but they'll get more and more used to acting against the green screens and the blue screens, acting against nothing practically. But I think when the technology first started coming in, actors weren't used to acting against nothing. Mm-hmm. And having a prop, whether some kind of prosthetic or, some kind of animatronic, I think it just helps out performance. So I think those earlier movies, having actors act against something helped out the performance, to where sometimes acting against early on against movies that had CG, there was nothing to act against. I think it hindered the performance, and I think if you look back from now, we'll see the differences.
I think that's an excellent point. As a matter of fact, it reminds me. I once watched a documentary about the man. I can't remember his name. I can't remember the actor who actually got for the original Godzilla into the suit, and he played him 12 other times. I know that, and. He was asked about, well, what direction, were you given? and Honda, he said that Honda told him, don't think about what you're going to crush. Don't think like a human. I've got to crush it. Just move.
Become the monster.
Exactly. Just kind of turn off your human brain. And he said that actually helped him. And he developed this. He said he would shake his hips, 2 or 3 times one direction, just as a twitch to move that big tail. And like I said, he said that the suit was like 200 pounds, and he could barely move. They had to tie a fishing line to his tail. It was so heavy he couldn't move it. And then up above the set, they would have people moving that fishing line around to move. But still, he was there on a set. He had something to act against. And it may sound funny to some people. I had never really thought about it before, kind of until you said that. If he hadn't turned off his brain, if Honda hadn't told him, hey, don't think like a human, it might be a lot easier to go, oh, hey, there's a guy in that rubber suit stomping on things. I can tell it's a human. By doing that, mimicking more of a lizard animal-like thing, it's more convincing. I mean, I didn't really think of him as a guy in a rubber suit, because that was a serious film. Even though it was a monster movie, it was a pretty serious movie. The ones that followed it were not so serious. It became a lot easier to say, oh, hey, there's a guy in a monster suit. And, Toho Studios certainly weren't known for their expensive budgets. They worked on the cheap back then. A studio that didn't work on the cheap back then was MGM. And a couple of years after Godzilla, I'll tell you this. Here's another special effects movie that really got me and gets me still to this day. MGM's Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
We talked about Blade Runner, movies with great production design.
Yeah, it holds up really well.
It does. It does. As a matter of fact, some of the things that you see in Forbidden Planet, we've kind of adopted today. And actually, another guy picked up on this a few years ago, or a few years after the movie, Gene Roddenberry. He cited Forbidden Planet as one of the inspirations for Star Trek. And so a lot of the things that you see in Forbidden Planet, you'll see at least toyed with a little bit.
The robot had the cool robot.
Robbie the robot.
Robbie the robot.
That thing was made for $100,000. $100,000 back in 1956, which, we're talking about a $1 million robot was created. Well, if we're talking now for this. Before Forbidden Planet, most outer space movies didn't really take it very seriously. And Anne Francis, the actress who played the lead female role in this movie, she said that the director, Fred Wilcox, told everybody that the most important thing before they started shooting was that you've got to take this seriously. The storyline was based on Shakespeare's The Tempest, so, that might have helped them to do that. And the budget was, I want to say, $2 million. And this is, again, in 1956. It barely made us. I think it made its money back plus a couple of $100,000. But please, if you have a chance to see that, Robbie the Robot, who I don't know, was that the same robot on Lost in Space, or was it kind of?
It looks very similar to the one on. Yeah.
I don't know if it's
Danger
exactly
Will
the
Robinson.
same. No, it's not
Danger.
the same one. What am I talking? It's not.
It looked, but there you can see the similarities.
Right.
Yeah, there's definitely similarities, and a Leslie Nielsen sighting.
Leslie Nielsen plays the hero, the romantic lead and hero in this movie. And I want to say this may have been his debut movie, but it's a far cry from the later roles that he took, like in all the spoof movies like Airplane and things like that.
But yeah, Forbidden Planet was a huge influence on Star Trek and a lot of other famous science fiction television shows, movies. It influenced a lot of writers and directors.
John Carpenter said that this is one of his, one of the movies that inspired him to become a film director. And it also must have inspired George Lucas, because there's some similarities for this movie to Star Wars, including there's a scene where, again, Frances, we see her in a hologram talking to someone. It's very reminiscent to the early scene where we see Princess Leia.
Well, there was a scene when Luke Skywalker, I guess, interacts with R2-D2, and he projects a hologram of Princess Leia.
Yeah.
And then that's what helped me, Obi-Wan.
The imitation of best flattery. Is that the saying? I always screw that saying up. Imitation is the best.
Highest form of flattery.
I always screw it up.
Well, of course, and then there's the one that we're always talking about. The good ones borrow, the great ones steal.
Yeah, there we go.
So,
and I just had a variation of that a while ago.
absolutely.
That was fantastic.
So I know Star Wars. I've been blathering on about some of my favorite. What, Morgan? I know Star Wars pretty high up on your list of any movie.
Right. So Star Wars came out in 1977. I don't know if I saw it that year. Again, my dad was in the Air Force, and so we lived on the Air Force base, and I may have seen it like a year or two later after it was released. But that movie has such an impact on me that it basically caused the passion to be in filmmaking.
Right.
And, of course, to want to do special effects and get into sci-fi movies, action movies, whatever. And so I'm just amazed that over the years, that they've kept making Star Wars movies, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and the budgets keep growing and growing and growing.
The quality, I don't know if that keeps growing. It's hard. Those first two movies, Rick, are so good.
They are.
Which was your favorite? I think I've asked you this, but which was your favorite Star Wars?
Probably Empire.
Empire, yeah, that's my favorite.
Okay, guys, no, wait a minute. Because this is, are you saying this is your favorite or the best, or both?
Both.
Both.
Yep.
My favorite's probably Jedi then.
Oh, your favorite?
Ah.
Okay.
But the best, I think, is
You think it's best?
Empire.
I would think most critics would agree with you, Steve, that Empire is the best film. I'm going to go with original Star Wars again. Now, nostalgia. You brought that up earlier when I mentioned King Kong seeing as a child. That definitely may play a factor in me liking Star Wars the best. But all three of those original movies are so good. When you think of Star Wars, what's the first image that comes into your head?
The Death Star.
Just the Death Star, right?
The Death Star.
The Death Star. So the Death Star, I guess, was built to scale. Let me see if I can look at my notes here real quick.
Have you got a blank to blank ratio for what they imagined that thing to be? Because I know King Kong was built on an 18-to-1 scale, I believe. So for every inch of that armature, they considered like it would be a foot, right? So the armatures were 18 inches. So King Kong was literally supposed to be like 18 feet, except for the one they built for New York, which was 24 inches tall, because they thought since New York is so big, Kong needed to be look a little bit taller.
I don't have the exact dimensions of the overall scale model for the Death Star, but the trench scene when Skywalker's flying through, and that trench was built on a 40-foot scale model. It was covered with plastic walls and towers. So I don't know how big the 40-foot scale model was to represent, but the fact that it's a 40-foot scale model, that's pretty big.
All right, so the lead special effects guy on the John Dykstra, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he build a special camera to use for that? I can't even remember what.
Oh my gosh, there's so much innovation on that film.
Right.
They actually pretty much built a company around to actually make the movie Star Wars.
They named it after him. It was called the Dykstra Flex.
The Dykstra Flex.
Dykstra Flex.
So that's pretty cool.
It sounds like a workout machine. Bow up to the Dykstra Flex. So So the Death Star was like your favorite special effect. What is it about that movie? When you look back on it, and you think about these special effects. What is it that grabs you?
I guess it's just the overall movie experience. It wasn't that the special effects overpowered the story, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
it was interwoven and integral to the story and enhanced the story.
Exactly.
And I think one of the things that blows my mind is that at that time, the effects that Lucas wanted to do to the level he wanted to do them, there was nobody that did them. And so he and some friends of his, I guess, and other people he knew, created Industrial Light and Magic for the purpose of creating the special effects for Star Wars. And I've heard several critics and others say that's like, in terms of like science fiction movies, there's before Star Wars, and then Star Wars kind of like changed everything.
It was such a massive. I mean, that movie made so much money at the box office. That, and plus it was coupled, with another very famous special effects. If you want to say driven movie, I don't know, not so much as Star Wars, but that was the same year that Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out.
So Star Wars, it seems to be that like the standard, at least for several years, decades, whatever, that everything was measured against in terms of special effects, visual effects, and sci-fi movies in general. So it was a game changer.
It was a game changer for not just special effects. Look, guys, I guess one of those indelible moments. You always have indelible moments. As far as my movie watching goes, I remember I was 10 years old when that came out, and I just remember the opening shot of the cruiser, going over.
Star Destroyer.
I just remember going. I can remember it like it was, some
movies you're hooked in the moment you see that.
Yeah, they just disappear. It was like it was yesterday.
Just the scope and the awe.
Right. I probably did have my mouth just
it filled up the whole screen and just kept going and going.
Yeah, it wouldn't stop.
It's like, how massive is this thing?
Right, exactly.
Then Vader does his thing. Lord Vader.
My movie genius trick is working right now. Just thinking about that moment, I got little goose pimples.
Got the goosey?
I got the goosies going up just thinking about it.
So, Star Wars won the Oscar the year it came out for Best Achievement in Visual Effects. Well, Empire won it in 1980, and Return of the Jedi won it in 1983.
Is it pretty much, when those movies came out, everybody's like, we're not going to win.
Right. Actually,
you got an effects movie? Yeah, you're not going to win.
You don't have the time to do it now, but thinking about that in that context, after we do the show, I'm going to have to go back and see what else got nominated along with it. Because now at one point, and I want to say it was during the 70s and 80s, there weren't necessarily 5 movies nominated for Best Special Effects. Every
3,
year.
I think. Wasn't it 3?
Sometimes there was just 2.
Yeah.
And one year, I think it was just one. It was just,
Well, that's what I'm going to be nominated for.
It was it was a special since there was no competition.
Are we going to win?
There was no
the
competition.
drama.
Right.
It was a special achievement award.
The special
It's
achievement.
special achievement award. I think it was the year that Earthquake. I think it was the year that Earthquake won.
Is that like a participation trophy?
That's well, there's nothing else that's going to match up to this. Here's your Oscar, guys.
Yeah, that's the we screwed up about 20 years ago when we should have gave it the Oscar, and so we're going to make up for it now. Award.
So like an honorary Oscar.
Yep, pretty much. All right, so the Star Wars movies, the top of the list. That's the apex of your special effects, right?
Well, it's funny. It used to be.
Oh,
It used to be.
so what's changed?
A small movie called The Matrix.
That's a fairly got some fairly decent special effects. Bullet time.
So, as much as Star Wars was revolutionary for me, The Matrix, like, reinvented that revolution.
Right. So what was it about that movie? How did that change? How did it hit you? Now you're older. You know, when The Matrix comes out, you've got a little bit of experience with you.
That's
What
a nice
about
way
that
of saying it.
Well, I've heard so many old age jokes from you guys. I'm going to try to be nice about it.
What's funny is when I saw the trailer, I felt like the kid watching Star Wars again. And then, what is The Matrix? That was the question that they left you with at the trailer.
Those bastards.
What is The Matrix? And so I got to know what The Matrix is.
So were you when you went to see it? Like were you in the theater? I mean, you saw it first in the theater. Mm-hmm. So were you sitting there? Like I mentioned, and when I was a kid, I'm sure I was slack jawed watching that cruiser go over. Were you just like,
Yeah, definitely. I was jaw dropped and just, I'm like, what? I don't know what just happened, but I know something happened.
You felt you experienced something.
I had an experience.
they don't come along very well. Let's be honest, guys. I mean, we all three love movies, but those moments are really still kind of the ones that just hit you in the, slap you in the face, punch you in the gut.
So does it still inspire the awe that it used to? Has it aged well for you?
It has. In
When's
fact,
the last time you saw it?
I guess when the Blu-ray box set came out for all three, for the Matrix trilogy.
No.
I watched all 3 movies back to back to back, and I watched all the behind the scenes extra features.
So you basically locked yourself in a room for,
About 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah, right.
there, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, if you watch all 3 movies and then all the extras,
Oh yeah, the extras.
you were,
yeah.
you were in there a while.
Yeah.
Was there a particular effect that when you think about the Matrix that says that's the effect?
I don't know if it's a particular effect, but man, where do you go? Probably the lobby scene when they rescued Morpheus from the 3 agents.
Right. So when he's climbing the wall, just moving. So that more than the bullet time scene, or what we think about, or at least what I think about when I think of the initial where the bullets come at him and he goes backwards.
Right. That awed me in the trailer, but as far as the movie itself goes, it's probably the lobby. Just wow, all that action and
right. So what about the sequels? What did you feel that same awe, or how did you feel about those?
I liked them probably better than maybe a lot of people did. Now, to be fair, I did play the Matrix video game that was in between the second and third one, so it kind of brought in some backstory that I thought was left out in the third one that might have explained things better.
Right.
So you're the real deal Matrix fan.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I have the art.
You've
of
seen the Animatrix.
I've got it.
Wow.
I've got the 2 graphic novels that came out, and I have the Art of the Matrix book that they released after the Matrix, which apparently that's what they use to sell the executives on about the Matrix script.
What did they use? What?
There's the Wachowskis hired two comic book artists to illustrate their script. The executives liked the script. They didn't quite understand the script. And so the Wachowskis hired two graphic novel artists to illustrate key scenes and moments in the script. And it's basically almost like a storyboard in a sense. And that's what they used to, it was 600 pages, and that's what they used to sell the executives
600 pages.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work.
Well, it's one of those movies that's so just detailed and, look, I'm a huge fan of The Matrix. The second one was okay. The third one was okay, better. But The Matrix is amazing. But I remember watching, I was like, this looks like a comic book or more, a graphic novel, more precisely. And probably, like you said, because they're illustrated and they had that great illustration, everything so storyboard and so orchestrated. It's amazing.
And The Art of the Matrix it's a beautiful book, and it led to a beautiful movie.
What was the color schemes and all that?
Yeah.
Was it relatively the same
in
the book as it was in the movie?
For the most part. So some of the drawings were black and white, but most of them were
that
color.
kind of green hue. That
and like the Sentinels, the machines, they have the red eyes and the kind of the black, metallic look to them, and they look just like they do pretty much in the book.
I'm going to find out, but you've got the
I've got
book.
it. Yeah,
I'd like to check that out.
Okay.
I can remember. Now, I didn't care for the second one very much. However, I remember the highway scene though. In the
Fantastic.
second movie
That's fantastic.
was pretty. I've got to rank that just about right along with a couple of those scenes in the Matrix. Again, the story wise, I didn't care for it as much, but technically that was pretty. I thought that was pretty awe inspiring. Help me out if I can't remember. The Matrix itself. I'm talking about the first movie. That was met with what mixed critical reaction at the time. I can't really recall.
Yeah,
but it's certainly. I mean,
I didn't know a lot about the movie when I just went to go see them. I was like, The Matrix, and it's got Keanu Reeves, who was in Point Break. I love Point Break for all you Point Break freaks. But I was like, hey, let's go see the movie. And I was like, man, this is not what I expected to see.
Yeah, and we've talked about, isn't that, I kind of miss some of those. I think it was the same way. I didn't know what to expect, didn't hear much about it before I saw it, just kind of, and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
What was that? What just hit me?
That's pretty much. It was like, okay, I think it's something with science fiction. It's got Lawrence Fishburne from Apocalypse Now. I love Apocalypse Now. It's got Keanu Reeves from Point Break, and I love Point Break. This is pretty much all I know.
And Joey Pants. Come on. Joey Pants.
It's got Joey Pants. It's got Joey Pants. And there's some kind of cool, like, little yoga thing that Keanu's doing in the trailer, with the back bend. That's all I knew. You see the movie, you're like, this is fantastic.
And what's amazing to me, speaking of the bullet time, so this movie came out 20 years ago. So even though we are living in the year of Blade Runner, like you said last time, we are also living in 20 years since The Matrix was released. But what's interesting is the bullet time effect that they use. They had to create, just like George Lucas had to create the effects for Star Wars through ILM because they didn't exist. So they had to create a company to create the effects. So same thing with The Matrix. And they invented a whole new system for the bullet time. Well, as I was doing research for the show and looking on YouTube to find additional behind-the-scenes footage for The Matrix, I actually found tutorials on how to do the bullet time effect using like Adobe Creative Suite. So I'm like, no, wait a minute. So in 20 years, we've gone from something revolutionary to something you can do with just, prosumer software.
Well, that's kind of the effects in The Abyss. Cameron was talking about, James Cameron was talking about the effects in The Abyss. And, how revolutionary they were. Well, now, I mean, we've got computers that do the same thing easily easily now we can do the abyss effect. It's just it's incredible.
The liquid,
Yeah,
the worm.
what they call the water weenie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So piggybacking off of that, so Cameron used that as a springboard for the T-1000 in Terminator 2, the liquid Terminator. Well, there's a scene in the Matrix of the baby being born that shows how humans are born and harvested. Well, there's a shot where like liquid, I don't know, silver comes down behind the baby or underneath it, and it made me think of the liquid Terminator. So things just keep kind of not recycling, but are passed down from movie to movie to movie.
Definitely.
Yeah. So speaking of Mr. James Cameron, he did before we got to the T2, we had to have, of course, the T1, the Terminator, more precisely the T800. That was a interesting shoot, to be sure, because he had to prove himself in a lot of ways, and they didn't quite have the budget. As a matter of fact, the budget on this film was amazingly $6.4 million.
Yikes.
Yeah. So when you look back at this movie, what do you guys think about when you think about the Terminator?
Well, the first thing I think of is some of Schwarzenegger's lines. I think I'll be back. But also, just the overall look of that movie is one thing. The effects were very good, and I knew enough about movies to know they don't have a lot of money. But you could also tell that he made every penny that he had count.
Yeah, well, Cameron was very, very detailed, as we've all learned later on, but he had a very specific look. The lighting style, what we call it, Cameron blue, very specific style, what he wanted. And plus Cameron too was, and still is, a great artist. So in watching interviews with Stan Winston, in development of the Terminator and the endoskeleton part of it, I think you said, I can't remember when you said it, what podcast that was, that, this thing kind of came to him in a dream. A nightmare, this chrome skeleton coming out of the fire, and I've actually seen that painting. The actual painting. It's exactly. It's the Terminator, but Cameron wanted other people's opinions and their designs, and so he said, hey, let's see what else we can come up with, and they did, and artists worked on it, but they ultimately decided Cameron's was the best. Winston said something kind of interesting, too, that Stan Winston said that in looking at Cameron's artwork, that he became the most important artist on the team, because when it came to developing shots or developing the creature, the effects, that he would have Cameron just sketch it out because he was such a good artist. And he would just give it to his design team. So it's like that process was a lot more efficient because of Cameron's ability, which I always thought that was fascinating, just to be able to sit there and draw something from your head.
We need no storyboard artist.
Yeah.
Here, just let me whip this.
He's a writer, director, producer, artist, genius. But in talking about the endoskeleton, the T-800, there was always this push-pull about how they wanted to shoot this thing. Did they want it to be a stop motion or what? And originally that was the plan. Cameron wanted, this something very lifelike and very terrifying. But Winston had to convince him that the way that you really need to do this was to go up in scale and do it more of a, puppet, like a life-size puppet, and with some animatronics kind of worked in. And that's ultimately, it took some convincing, but that's ultimately what they went with. So when you see the bigger Terminator, because there's a lot of Terminator designs worked into this film. So it's talking about scale. When you see the Terminator, that's actually a man carrying a puppet on his shoulders, working it within the shot. And talking about having something that you can act against that also helped for better performance, but it also helped cut down on the shooting time. And when you're under a tight budget, you're not having to go back and do all these effects and, create the stop motion. It allowed you to shoot it right there in principal photography. So it helped Cameron out on the shoot and move things along at a lot faster rate.
Which, again, didn't have a lot of money, had to save wherever he could.
Yeah. There's things too about talking about precisely the endoskeleton. So they had to, when you have like the close-ups of the hands and the feet and the legs, those are robotic. They had to build an oversized head. So when you have close-up of the shot of the eyes, they built that oversized so it looks more to scale. Because that's one of the kind of key things when you shoot something. You always want to make it bigger, because when you shoot it in camera, it's going to come out smaller, so you make it bigger. It's a weird twist. But the other thing too that I found just kind of fascinating about this whole thing was I thought that the makeup, the makeup on Arnold, and talking about the Terminator itself. The makeup turned out a lot better than they anticipated. That also allowed them, talking about kind of happy accidents, with the puppet earlier, working so well. By having the makeup work so well on Arnold, it allowed a real actor to give a performance, and also help that principal photography time to be able to shoot it, go ahead and shoot the footage, not have to do anything in post or, on the side, eating up more of the budget. Once again, these things you can't plan for them until you get into the actual production cycle. So a lot of things were working out pretty well on the Terminator shoot, but some of the things that did not work out so well were, for example, during the if you guys remember the big tanker truck explosion. So I'm going to say this just for a little warning. Folks who have not seen a Terminator,
Run!
folks that have not seen a Terminator, just going to be some spoilers over the next couple of movies I'm going to talk about. Just kind of, heads up. I'll talk about The Thing here in a little bit. I'm going to talk about the Terminator now. So
pause the
podcast.
So just go watch the movies and come back.
Fair warning.
Be a great evening, man.
Yeah, fair warning. And if you haven't seen these movies, those are two great movies that you can watch, because we're going to get a little spoiler territory here. But the tanker explosion, originally, when they shot that in principal photography, they shot that in front of a police armory kind of deal, and had helicopters on top of the roof, and of course, you had all this ammunition inside, and that's where they shot that whole scene. The trucker, the tank truck chasing, Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn. Well, obviously, what Cameron wanted to do, he wanted really to blow the tanker truck up. I mean, he wanted to blow an actual tanker truck up, and you can't do that there because of all the ammunition and the helicopters. Right. So they had to figure out a little bit of a workaround, and what they did is they built this miniature set, which is not so miniature. When we think of miniature sets, we think about Legos. They're building huge platforms, but they built this like 8-foot long tanker truck. And the visual effects team, the special effects team, their philosophy was to stage out action. So one thing leads to another. And instead of having the tanker truck, say tanker truck blows up, boom, it all goes boom at one time. No, have it go like in some kind of sequence, building up to something else that leads to the ultimate conclusion. What they decided to do, so in the scene, Michael Biehn runs to the back of the tanker truck. He's got the explosives. He sticks the explosives in the back of the tanker truck, runs off, blow up, boom. Okay, great. So they've already shot that, and now here they are. They're doing they got the miniature set up, and what they did is they rigged 42 separate explosions into this 8-foot section of tanker truck. Okay, now you're going to have a cable rigged to the rig of the actual part of the truck on the axle, and it's going to pull the truck forward. And as we're pulling the truck forward, we're going to blow the tanker truck up, and it's going to go in a series, boom, 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 leading up to the cab of the truck, where it's going to blow up the Terminator, and then more mayhem is going to happen. Sounds wonderful. They do it. So they call action. Everybody's get set. Call action. They pull the cable. The wheels of the truck go rolling out. The semi truck falls there in spot. The guy has already hit the explosions, and they blow the truck up, and the truck's just sitting there. They don't get the shot because the cable pulled the axle too hard out from beneath the truck, and so they lost the whole shot.
Yanked it out.
Wow.
Yanked it out. Pulled it too hard. Didn't work out so well that time, but you kind of what they were saying was best laid plans. You kind of live and learn a little bit, and that cost them a couple of days, and they were able to get it in the next go around.
How many explosions did you say?
42.
That's what I was.
Yeah,
I was like, I think he said 42.
Yeah, there are 42 separate explosions in that 8-foot section of that truck, of that tanker.
That's pretty wild.
That would have been fun to blow up.
Yeah, and if you go back and you watch the shot, it does go from back, working its way up to the cab of the truck, because it's just more dramatic that way instead of just blowing the whole thing up.
So let me ask you, why? I could just see the glee in your eye talking about these shots from the Terminator. Why is this the one that you went with first?
Well, the younger self this was one of the first movies I watched on VHS. It was I saw The Natural, and I saw The Terminator, and it was so for that reason it's kind of got a special place in my heart. But the other thing was this was just a cool idea. It's just a freaking cool idea that you got this killer man machine coming from the future to go back to the past to affect the future. It's just a great idea. It's fantastic.
Did you see?
And the effects, come on, the effects.
How old were you? How much longer after? What was it released in 84?
Yeah, I was 14, 15.
So you saw it you saw it as soon as it came out then?
It came out on VHS, and Mom and Dad ran down to the local video store, brought home, back in the day where you had to bring home a VCR.
Yes, right.
Yeah. You actually had to rent the VCR, and you were charged for not rewinding a tape. That's good times. That's good times right there. But that's
did you all watch that movie together?
No, they watched it before I did.
Oh, I guess what? Just so you're still pretty young.
Yeah, just kind of see what it was an R-rated film,
right?
R-rated film, and they just wanted to see what exactly was in the Terminator, and
that and The Natural.
Yeah,
that's an interesting comment. That's an interesting double feature.
Yeah, I was watching baseball and the Terminator.
Wow.
But it's just one of those films just kind of stuck with me, and I look back on it now. I got more of an appreciation for it because they didn't have a lot of money, and it's things that now if you're a filmmaker that if you wanted to do, believe it or not, you could do. Obviously maybe still not even to that scale, but you could do
within
because
somewhat of a reach then.
Yeah, because they are practical. Because they are practical effects. And the thing is, too, now you're talking about, just different, you're talking about urethanes and plastics and materials are cheaper, than they were back then because they make on mass scale. So a lot of stuff, as a filmmaker you can do. So I've got a lot of appreciation for the film itself. And kind of going back on the endoskeleton thing, too, it was some simple things like, you're talking about one reason I like the movie so much. It's like, so we need the Terminator, this blown off, part torso dragging itself across the ground. How are we going to do that? Well, a lot of times I think people sit around, this is impossible. We need it to drag itself across the ground. It's impossible. Oh, it's simple. What they did is they rigged it from underneath, and they dragged the thing pretty much across the ground. That's pretty much as simple. They were underneath the Terminator and using like a puppet-like motion, kind of get the movements right, try and get the movements right. And literally, pretty much, lack of a better term, dragging it across the ground, across that walk there, when it's on that walkway. So I'm saying ground, but it's on that walkway.
So are you more? I want to say we've gone over this maybe in another episode as far as which movie you preferred if you had to choose between, say, the original and T2. I thought that you said you'd probably go with T2, but let me ask you: are you still like, in a way, more impressed with the original? Because, like I say, what was the budget again? $6 million, $6.5 million?
Yeah, just over $6.
$100 million.
Yeah,
I can see where the second one would be considered maybe certainly the smoother movie, the better movie maybe. But golly, man.
Yeah, if you ask me on just a pure entertainment movie scale, just man, T2 is like this massive piece of entertainment. I mean, liquid metal. You got the old Terminator and the new Terminator, and it's a great. It's like somehow they took this really cool idea and then they ramped it up. So, and it works as a sequel. As a movie itself, I probably like the movie better, but I appreciate Terminator more. Talking about some other things about the Terminator. So in the opening sequence, there's this, the whole future bombed out city, and once again talking about how having an appreciation of how things are done. So it's pretty much simple. It's when you see these bombed out buildings, it's like foam core, cardboard, a lot of cardboard, and what they did is they built this 3-foot high platform. It's about 3-foot high platform, about 16 by 18 in dimension, and they were able to stage this whole sequence on this platform. That's where it all went down. They use a lot of old school tricks. We talked about a couple of podcasts ago or so, those old school like Citizen Kane techniques. So to use like force perspective by putting something larger in front of the frame to make things look in diminishing returns in the back of the frame. Just a lot of old school techniques. When you see what they call the HK, these HK, what they're called the hunter killer tanks and this hunter killer aircraft. It's the hunter killer aircraft was kind of a pain in the butt because they have this thing suspended pretty much on like piano wires, and with anything suspended, it's going to have a natural inclination to rock back and forth, even when it's in motion. So it's always going to have this because of the balance issue. It's always going to want to rock back and forth. And so that was kind of a pain in the tail, but they finally got that thing to work. And with the HK tanks, they had to do it piece by piece because of the way you have to shoot it, and because it was so low budget, and to get it to crawl across and break the skulls. When you see explosions, when you see these explosions, this is a pretty cool thing. They did this deal to where they took GE flash bulbs and they put like an amber orange gel over these flash bulbs. And that's kind of stage one of the explosion. And the actual ignition of the explosion, they use like walnut dust. And I've actually experimented with this myself. So I used to do a lot of construction. And one thing is we get a fire going, I'd take sawdust and I'd throw it towards the fire and it'd go, woof. It was fantastic. I mean, I would do it all day. I would never get anything done. Because it would just blow up. I mean, the instant it hits this fire,
Nice.
It just so they take this atomized. When walnut dust atomizes, it has this nice orange explosion. So what you do is you stage it out in two steps. You hit the GE lights, boom, you have the amber glow. You hit the walnut dust, you have the fire, and the combination of the two, it has this nice burnt orange explosion look, because that's what people think about when they see explosions. They want to see burnt orange. They don't want to see some funky looking yellow color, white light. They want to see that deep devastation orange color. And that's how they managed to achieve that. This movie is just so loaded with technical stuff. They did have another technical issue, so just a little bitty things. When they roll a grenade, if you guys remember, they roll a grenade underneath one of the tank tracks, right? Mm-hmm. they couldn't get the darn thing to roll over the grenade. It's just like a little bitty, couple inch prop or whatever it is, but they roll it, they throw it towards there, and they just could not get it to hit the thing. And finally, after 26 takes, they finally were able to get it to actually roll over and then do the whole scene to where they had the explosion.
Getting into Kubrick territory there. 26 takes.
Well, they just couldn't get it. They just couldn't get their aim.
Wow.
They're just tossing to get the aim right. So
Inter CGI, right?
that's where one of those things where CGI is probably. It's probably a good thing. Yeah, they did like a lot of rear screen projection and front screen projection, and once again, Cameron was very, very precise on the look of it. He wanted the lasers to have a very certain and very specific look. It had to have a certain color hue. But look, that's when you make these kind of movies. That's what it takes. It takes this kind of dedication to detail, and that's the stuff I love about really great films. It drives me crazy. It drives me freaking crazy when I watch a movie and you're like, man, there's a good movie there, but did they pay attention to detail? And that's why I have such an admiration for people who want to take. Look, and it's maddening. I've worked with people like this on another. It's maddening. But I love working with people who say, look, I'm not going to compromise on this, because if you compromise on that, guess what? You're going to end up compromising on something else in the film. That's how you end up with a great movie, and that's how you end up with a movie like The Terminator.
And the special effect that I wish that everyone out there could see is the expression on Steve's face right now. I haven't seen him get into something like this in a long time. That's acting. You just need to be in front of the camera. But that was awesome.
That's passion.
that is passion. Well, and I can understand that. I mean, you're passionate about somebody's work on screen that they had the passion to just get you fired up, and then you do kind of get ticked off at lazy filmmaking. And there's a lot of lazy filmmaking out there, guys. There really is. And that's why it's so great to see somebody like Cameron, pros at work, like you say, that will take that extra time to figure it out.
Yeah, it's maddening. It's maddening to work with. I bet. I mean, it's just got to be crazy. But the end result's just wow.
Guys, we're creeping into to Cameron Blue nighttime here. It's getting late. I think with each of us probably have dozens of movies that we would like to talk about more special effects, but we probably need to save those for another day.
Put them in the film vault.
Put them in the film vault. I would love to come back and talk about this. Good Lance, think about all the cool effects movies we haven't even mentioned.
Oh yeah, there's a Cameron movie in particular that I'm going to hit on, and a Carpenter film. And
right. Yeah. there's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we were definitely. Oh my gosh, I know you're so excited about that movie. I would love to hear what you've got to say about it. Is this going to be our teaser though? Are we going to tease this the next time?
Yeah, we use a teaser. Yeah, we can tease it.
So Nobsters, let us know what your favorite special effect and visual effect movies are. Hit us up on Twitter at Film Nobs. Check us out on Facebook. We got a Pinterest page, and we have a YouTube channel. And you can, of course, listen to the podcast across all platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. And we'll check you out next time. Until then,
take care, everybody.